Well, hello and welcome to episode number 417 of the Plain Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's pack show, one airline is brushing the dust off its A380s, one airline loses some luggage, and this time it's not Nev's, and also one airline is having bunk beds just for fun. And in this week's show, we are all back together. Team, assemble! And joining me over in the PTUK Master Suite Studios this week, it is, of course, Matt Smith.
Well, hello, welcome. How are we all?
Or should I call you Cough?
All right, come on. I'm doing my best. I turned up. That's the main thing.
Honestly, last week, you were so ill, bless you, last week. How are you feeling?
Yes, I'm not too bad. Ironically, I felt all right last week, to be honest with you. It's just that the voice and everything had all got. Unfortunately, poor Mama Smith has got it now, though. So we're having. So we're just keeping half an eye. A little bit worried about her, bless her. Yeah. But yeah, she's doing all right. She's a tough old bird. It was. I think the thing for me was when because you and Gemma quite often tune in on a Sunday morning, don't you? And it was. I think it was the messages from was it the message I got from you that said hello, is Nigel covering you today or something like that?
I honestly, I genuinely, this is honest to God's truth. Me and Gemma both sat in the kitchen and said, "Where's Matt today?" And Gemma said, "That's not Matt." And I said, "No, it's not. It's Nigel."
No, it was me.
And it was you. You sounded that bunged up.
Yeah, I know.
You sounded like a completely different human.
Yeah. I mean, if you can wake anybody up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I mean, at one point we were negotiating to get producer John to do the show for me because that's how bad it was, because I couldn't wake anyone else up.
Honestly, I've never heard anyone so ill in my life.
Yeah. Anyway, we got through.
Anyway, you're here now.
I am. Yes,
good.
absolutely.
That's
like
good.
Nothing ever happened.
Good.
Moving on.
Yeah. Get some gin into you. You'll be fine. And joining us this week, he's back after his travels. It is, of course, the king of tech, the king of AV, and the king of BA. It's Neville Barnes.
Oh, yes, we had some stories to tell later on in the show, definitely, about the travelling business. But no, great to be back. Had a nice week in Portugal with Mrs. Nev. And I went and bought some Apple AirTags for reasons which will become obvious in about 20 minutes' time.
Lovely. Okay.
But great to be back on the show. And I've also got some hay fever weirdness going on as well. So I've got a bit of an unusual voice as well tonight. But anyway, let's see how we get on. And I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you'll be healthy for Sunday, Nev. More info on that later on for the listeners. But hopefully you'll be well Sunday. And
the show is published on Sunday, right?
I know. Well, I know. If you're listening to this on Sunday, me and Nev are at seething.
Right.
Anyway,
okay.
Anyway, honestly, it's a star-studded show this week. Honestly, this is so nice for me to be able to say this after so many weeks. But he's actually back with us. He's back, our fourth member of the team. It gives me great pleasure to welcome back to the show, Armando.
Thanks, Carlos. Preemptive apologies for all of my audio quality over the last couple of weeks, because most of those videos were produced, or audio segments were produced, me thinking that I was gonna be on the show, and then about 2 hours prior to the show, getting a text from dispatch saying, "Hey, you better start heading towards the airplane."
Oh, no.
So most of them were recorded from an FBO somewhere, or even in the back of the airplane, just on a regular old iPhone with no microphones or anything like that. But always glad to be back here live. It's been a busy couple of weeks, like you said, Carlos.
And I'm sorry, who are you again? Sorry, just remind me.
Guest hosts.
Guest hosts, excellent. That's what we love. We do love a guest host. Yeah.
Oh, it's great to have you back. I mean, and like you said, you've been doing an absolute shed ton of flying.
I didn't know
over the first few
months. Really not what I thought you were gonna say.
Yeah, everything nipped up there for a minute.
I thought you would. I haven't had a beer, so I'm fine.
Oh, very good. I've had whiskey. What could possibly go wrong there?
Hopefully you can fill us in on some of the details later on, Armando, about all the exciting trips you've been up to.
Well, to be honest, it's not that exciting. It's just a lot of flying. The highlight was last week, Meg and I got an exclusive use this is what happens in corporate when you're flying for private owners of the Pilatus. And we took the Pilatus up to upstate New York for a couple days. All right, what a crazy opportunity. But we did take the airplane up. Yeah, we flew up to Syracuse and stayed in the Inns of Aurora on the Finger Lakes of New York, and it was beautiful for 4 days. Came back on my birthday, so that was. No, everything was paid for by the owner of the aircraft, including hotels, lodging, and
does he know that yet?
Yeah.
The invoice has been sent. It's the first? Yeah. The invoice was sent about 2 hours ago.
Wow.
Put it this way, Nev. Armando was running that PC-12 all the way there, not leaned. Was
indeed
full.
Going for full volume. Absolutely. And if you do follow Armando on social media, by the way, there's some absolutely stunning pictures on there. So if you aren't doing so, make sure you do. It looked like an honestly, it looked like a fancy castle. It really did.
I find out what you said.
Well, that's because I put a fancy woman in front of it.
You see what? Oh, stop it, please.
Oh,
sorry.
She's in the background listening. Anyway, it's good to have all the team back again.
When was the last time? I'm going to ask John. You're going to ask John that because we've also got John tonight as well, which is also a bit of a rare thing as well. When was the last time we were all together in one hit, all of us?
1926.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be last year, I feel. I'm sure we've done one like so. Anyway,
the 400th,
412, we think. But anyway, more research will be done on that. It doesn't seem like very many shows ago. Are you sure about that?
Anyway, an age ago.
Yeah. Anyway, John can look that up while we move on.
Anyway, where are we? It's the top of the show, isn't it? So.
Yes, yeah. We're only 7 minutes in, Carlos.
I know, and it's Patreon time.
Is it?
Patreon beginning of the month, and it's obviously the beginning of the month, and it's when we say a special thank you to everyone who has very kindly donated to the show this month. So, Nev, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed to everybody who's donated on Patreon. Alex Robinson, Dirk S, Sasha Beer, Stephen Ivy, Nicholas Codling, Luis Casares, Alan White, Stephen Howland, Tanya Wyman, Megan Carrion, Jacob Darlington Brown, Nicholas Hewitt, Masha, Owen, Ruben Wells, Neil Lanwarn, Graham Haley, Jonathan Warner, Eric Graves, Jordan Rose, Andrew Wilson, Captain Jeff, Adam Spink, Liz Piper, Jeff Ward, Jenny Parkinson, Evan Shue, Philip Labe, Stuart Backer, Ray Williams and Stephanie Plummer. And for those who have used the PayPal method, that's Craig Urosoko, Masouz Kareem, Richard Adams and Tony Stubbing. So thank you very much to all of you. Your contributions are greatly received, and that's the other reason why we look forward to the first day of the month as well. So thank you one and all.
Yeah, and it's important because this Sunday, as we said, me and Nev are off to Seething, and we're hoping to get some great content. We've got a couple of bits that have been lined up for us by some of the members there, which I think, Nev, is going to be some very interesting chat had this Sunday.
I think so. So we're going to do some video and audio for you all, and we'll be featuring that over the next couple of weeks as well.
Yes. So we're going to say a hello to everyone in the chat room that's joined us this evening, along with the bots who I've just successfully banned and removed. I've reported them for various things, you'll be pleased to know. And let's say hello to Captain Cruz, GB's Model Zone, Richard Adams, Mazouz, hello to you. Alan White, Alex Robinson, hello. Pilot Logan Lynch, hello to you. Lee Davies, he's a bit concerned that I've not got a beer. I will rectify that very soon. John Clara is also in there. Hello to you, John. Flyer152, hello to you as well. And let me scroll down. Richard Adams, our main man, Micah, is also in there. GB's Model Zone. Matt C, hello to you, Matt. Alan White, just make sure I don't miss anyone else. Rakon, hello to you as well. Graham Haley, hello, Graham. Good to see you in there.
This is great. This is like a reunion from the 400.
Yeah, Captain Ridiculous Wits. Obviously, it wouldn't be a show without Captain Ridiculous Wits in the
Good
YouTube
point.
chat room.
Yep.
Let me scroll down. Keep scrolling. I'm not missing one out. And hello to everyone else who's joined us this evening. It's nice to see you in there.
And everyone else who knows me. That's essentially what you were saying.
Exactly. And on that note, quickly, before we start the show, I'm going to say hello, a special hello, to a certain person who came and met me at the end of a gig last weekend. And the chap in question, Mike, is one of our listeners. He listens to the audio podcast. And he came over and had a chat with me last weekend at the end of the wedding that I'd done. He was a guest at the wedding, recognized my voice on the microphone, and he came over and said, honestly, it was so bizarre. And honestly, we had a really good chat. We were chatting for well over an hour at the end of the night. I didn't leave the pub until 1 a.m.
Oh, wow.
And it was brilliant. So hello to you, Mike. I know you're listening to the show. Very nice to see you last weekend, and great to have you on board as a listener as well. So, yeah, it was good, guys. It was nice to meet up with one of the listeners, albeit at a wedding. So there we go.
Was it his wedding?
No, it wasn't. No,
right.
He was a guest there, but it was just so bizarre. But it was great though to see Mike. So hello to you. Yes, he's a boat builder. He builds boats. He's got a very important job. Very, very interesting.
Alan White says, if that's not celebrity status, what is?
Exactly.
Did you have your Delta cap on? Is that why you recognised?
No, I didn't have my Delta cap. No, I was in full DJ mode that evening. But
I thought it might have been your agent coming up to you at the end of the gig for his 20% cut or whatever.
Oh God, Nev, I hope not.
Expensive business. Yeah.
Anyway, we've got loads to get through on the show. So if all the team are ready, shall we start?
Ready? Let's do it.
No, because everything's frozen. Hang on.
Okay,
Sorry, we're ready now.
Let's
No,
let
it's
it
all
go.
good. Don't panic. Here we go. Right. So do that again, Carlos. Pretend like it never happened.
So as all the team are here, and we've got lots of commercial news to do, shall we go?
Yeah.
Turn on the seatbelt light. Please take your seats and fasten your seatbelts.
So the first story this week comes to us from Aero Telegraph, Simple Flying, Reuters.com and AirInsight.com. And the headline, Lufthansa, they are reactivating their A380s. Kind of sounds weird, doesn't it? Reactivating. It's like they're going to put some AAA batteries underneath and sort of power things up. But Lufthansa are reactivating their Airbus A380s in response to the steep rise in customer demand and the delayed delivery of ordered aircraft. The airline expects to use the long-haul aircraft, which are popular with customers and crews. Don't know about that. I haven't heard that from some people. Again, from summer 2023, the return centers around the delay to the Boeing 777X program, which is unlikely to see deliveries until 2025. Lufthansa placed 14 of its A380s in storage as a result of the COVID pandemic, and 6 have been sold. And out of the remaining 8 of remaining, 4 or 5 are being poised to return to Lufthansa's Munich hub. So we were chatting, actually, weren't we, Matt, last week about the A380. We did do a story about the A380 last week.
I don't remember what happened last week at all, if I'm honest with you.
You were ill, don't worry. Yeah. But obviously, with the delays and that, with the 777, we were looking at different types, obviously, with a twin engine, 4 engines, all the thing about cost, running the aircraft and that. Now Airbus are obviously finished production of the A380, so they're not being made anymore. But Nev, it's one of those things, because BA have got a handful of 380s, and they've had theirs back in service for a while.
Yeah, they've got 12 in total, and some of them are still at Madrid, I think, from memory, but most of them are back at Heathrow now. It would be interesting to know, I don't know the answer to this, what load factors the A380 has to run at, according to how it's configured, obviously, for the airline to start, to be profitable on those routes. Because if you end up with a situation where you're only filling it 60 or 70%, that's probably on the margins of what's acceptable. But of course, the most 380 economy class is quite reasonable, I think, from what I've heard, although I've never flown on A380 yet. So it'll be interesting. But these 777X delays are a problem now, because that's going to affect a number of airlines just at the time where they need to be getting this hardware back in the air. I think that the problem is going to be, it's always the way, isn't it? You've just got this massive delay between when you really want aircraft and when it's actually delivered. And sometimes you end up with aircraft which are too big for your current requirements, but you might need them in 2 or 3 years' time. It's a never-ending problem that the airlines must have, I would imagine.
Well, of course, some of the problem here, Nev, also is because people had got airlines had got new aircraft that were due to be arriving. Obviously, then along came something called a pandemic, and so suddenly you've got all this equipment essentially, and they're saying, "Oh no, well, we can't take it now because we can't afford it, and everything's all being benched, and we're laying off staff left, right, and centre." I mean, that's a difficult time for the airlines as well, for the airline makers as well, isn't it? I suppose, because you want to be like good to the customer because you want them to buy more aircraft from you, but at the same time, if you're not, if the deal is not going ahead like as planned, I mean, budgets and everything are all set based on when they're going to be receiving what money and all that kind of thing. I mean, that must have had quite an impact on, bottom lines and things as well.
Well, of course, fuel costs as well are substantial, and even if they're actually using fuel today that they bought a year ago, because they obviously hedge fuel, it's probably still quite expensive. And then you start running a 4-engine aircraft rather than a 2-engine aircraft, and suddenly the profit margin starts to become a bit thin, doesn't it? So,
on that note, why ask the team this? We've talked about it briefly before in previous shows, but what are your thoughts on why do you think Airbus have never thought of or re-engined the 380 with more fuel-efficient engines to give it that?
I mean, is it again, Armando might be the better one to try and give us an educated guess on that. But I mean, is it something simply like you need the size of those engines in order to be able to get them off the ground with a full payload and stuff like that? I mean, could it be something as simple as that? Customers is John is saying in our ears, committed to buying tickets, I suppose, as well.
Yeah, I think there's been a bunch of different factors, like you guys are saying. The pandemic obviously is just an extreme factor in this, but the A380, at the time that it was designed with the most efficient engines. But even there, as Peter often talks about on the show when he's on, there's incremental improvements on these engines. So I can only imagine that the A380 has upgrades and has the most efficient, engines that it could. That's not to say that they couldn't re-engine it, but I mean,
but what are they going to?
Who would take on that investment right now when they were all being made into keychain tags? So
true.
That's a massive expense to re-engine an airplane or a fleet of airplanes if it's not succeeding anyways and not selling tickets.
But I mean, as an aircraft, it is definitely succeeding, though, isn't it? If we're using the A380 as an example, because I mean, I think if they were continuing to make them, Emirates would still continue to buy them. I mean, they absolutely love that aircraft.
Chicken and egg, because they're not being made for a reason.
Yeah, true.
So,
true.
And another thing that Micah brought up was it takes less ground handling staff to fly the A380 right now. So it's less infrastructure to operate an A380 as opposed to A350 or something like that.
But is it long term though? Because of the sheer volume of people you can get.
I think this is a stopgap. This is just me looking into a little crystal ball, but I don't think this will last. I think this is just a stopgap right now for the pandemic. And
I wish we had an engineer in the fold as such, because it would be interesting. Because I was looking into having my transit van engine remapped, having the engine remapped. No, and for No, listen, for a couple of £100, you can have your engine remapped or an engine remapped, but it also not just gives you better brake horsepower, performance, and torque, but they also guarantee you a fuel economy saving on an engine as well. So I wonder whether that's something that can be done with airliners with engines, whether there's a software fix that can be done to an engine to enable it to run.
I think if it was a software fix, somebody would have already done it, I would have thought. I mean,
And you
I
should
think-
tell
I think
your
they-
insurance company, Carlos, if you are thinking of having your.
Yeah.
Oh, luckily, this isn't a worldwide public pod. Oh, wait. a minute.
no.
That's the main thing. Yeah.
Indeed, yeah.
Um,
Indeed.
This reminds me of a funny thing that I learned from Navy pilots on the P3. They used to just shut down 2 engines. They take off with 4 engines, right? It's got 4 Allison turboprops on it. And once they got up at altitude and burned a little bit of gas, they would shut down the 2 outboard engines to save gas. And they would just fly around on 2 engines. So maybe the A380 can do that. Just shut down 2 as soon as they get in the air.
Well, I suppose once it's up in the air, ironically, I mean, the cruising altitude doesn't require again, but that, I mean, I feel like somebody would have already thought of that if that was a viable option.
I don't think the safety regulators would love that.
Yeah. John is saying it's possibly something to do with sort of psychology with the passengers, and them not liking the idea of them being shut down.
I've spoken with enough airline pilots that have had engine shutdowns, and I think most, unless there's like a compressor stall where it starts like pop pop pop, or it takes a bird or something like that, most people don't actually know when that engine is shut down. Ad geeks. Everybody that listens to this show would immediately be perked up. But most customers on an airliner, I don't think would ever know that they were.
And of course, our wonderful listeners, of course, wouldn't react to it in any way, shape, or form because they're not silly and would go, "Oh, okay, that's all right. We're just on 2 engines. We only really need 1, so that seems like a sensible thing to do."
Yeah, I mean that's in the chat room, Mike is saying it. They'll never be as efficient as
when a certain British airline was advertising the fact, especially for the A340, where it was saying 4 engines for long haul, suggesting that was a much safer way of operating than having 2 engines or 3 engines. Well, that went out the window fairly quickly, didn't it? With the ETOPS rules and the ability to fly very long distances with quite a long distance from your diversion airfields as well. So, but no, 2 engines is the way to go, obviously, with these hyper-efficient turbines that they're running at the moment. But, it'll be interesting to see how the A380 fares over the next couple of years and what airlines, bring them back. And there might be a situation where some aircraft become available for lease to other airlines that hadn't thought about using the A380, for example. So,
like the high fly thing, of course, they
we still might see Ryanair 380 in the skies at some point. You never know.
Okay, that's a very unrealistic target there. What's his name again? Carlos.
Dave.
Dave, isn't it? Yeah.
Anyway, moving on to you, Matt, for the next story. And obviously, it's been a very funny last few weeks in the UK.
Indeed, yes, and I mean, there's no real way to sugarcoat this story. Essentially, never stop me if I'm wrong here, but it looks like the government are going to interfere with the aviation industry, which fills me with dread and fear, if I'm brutally honest with you. But, we'll soldier on together, everyone. Here we go. Several sources on this: Business Travel News Europe, the government website itself, and also Sky News that we've got here. The UK government unveils its 22-point plan to tackle aviation disruption. Yes, I can hear everybody sighing with fear in their hearts following a stream of negative press in recent weeks over flight cancellations and staffing issues. The action plan outlines how the government will support the sector through the peak season, including steps to ensure the delivery of a realistic summer schedule and assistance to recruit and train staff. Now, I've put some keynotes, if you like, together in this. As there's 22 points here, but I've just picked out the ones that were of sort of vague interest to me on this, basically. The first one, which sort of kind of makes sense here, and I think to be fair, we've been talking about this, I think, over the last few weeks, actually, when we've been covering this story. And it's from the government's perspective, they're saying we and the CAA have set out 5 specific expectations to the industry to deliver a successful summer operation. Summer schedules must be reviewed to make sure they are deliverable. And I know this is something that we've been covering over several weeks, isn't it, guys? Because you do worry that, you know, people are turning up at the airport and then their flight is being cancelled, when it will have been pretty clear to dispatchers and everything like that, probably for a couple of weeks, that certain flights are not going to be fulfilled. And I think that's where you know, like the delays at the airport and things have been really exacerbated, is the fact that they could have been avoided by communicating with the customer better. So this is one of the things that I'm sort of quite keen about on this report. But as I say, the government's meddling always makes me a bit nervous. Everyone from ground handlers to air traffic control must collaborate on resilience planning. Passengers must be promptly informed of their consumer rights when things go wrong, and if necessary, compensation in good time. Now, I think one of the articles that I was reading while I was doing the research for this here, I can't remember, Nev, you might be able to remember, there was one airline that was busy boasting that saying, you know, if it was 5 hours, obviously, that they would start giving you compensation and all that kind of thing. But actually in law, if I remember correctly, it's actually 3 hours.
Yes, there's a lot of this is all very much, you know, written into legal requirements for passenger compensation and all the rest of it. And of course, there are exceptions, which are circumstances beyond our control, and that covers a whole myriad of things. Maybe even crew illness in some cases as well. So if the first officer hasn't turned up, that's a possibility.
Also, apparently, it depends on the distance of the flight as well. Depends on you know, what the time scale is, if you like. Yeah, one thing that did surprise me though, and of course we've heard a lot of stories. There's been a very vocal BBC correspondent, hasn't there, who's had an awful lot of trouble on flights of late, especially at Heathrow, from what I was understanding. And one of the points that they've come up with is disabled and less mobile passengers must be given assistance they require. Safety and security must never be compromised, which is an obvious one. There were a few that I also picked out that I thought were quite fascinating. Point number 9 was that we will launch a new aviation passenger charter, a one-stop guide for passengers, informing them of their rights, responsibilities, and what they can reasonably expect of the aviation industry when flying. Now, I mean, I must admit, I kind of felt that I felt like we kind of knew what we were and weren't entitled to. I mean, or is that just because we're slightly more experienced flyers? Maybe, I don't know.
I think you're being extremely generous there, Matt.
Am I? I know.
It's also written in the fine print of the when you buy and book your ticket. But you know, do you read the terms and conditions? Because that's what's expected.
Who reads that?
No. Okay. Well, perhaps you should. And well. Okay, so I've lost that point. I'll move on to another one. We have worked with the CAA and industry to publish and promote guidelines for passengers as part of a joint campaign of activity to communicate things that they need to know and do when travelling by air this summer, helping to speed up the processing time and reduce queues and delays. And I think this one I find quite relevant, because I was quite surprised again when researching for this story how many people were arriving at security and then discovering that they needed, for example, perhaps some countries still require you to have like the COVID certificates and proof that you've had 3 vaccinations and all that kind of thing before you can. France especially, still here in the, you know, travelling from the UK to France, you are required to prove that you've had at least 2 jabs within, I think it was 6 months. And if it's outside of that, you need to prove that you've had a 3rd booster. Although most countries, again, are sort of moving things on. Mayman Micah is saying things I need to know, like not taking on carry-on in an emergency evacuation. Indeed, yes.
Did you just memorize all of those COVID requirements? Because I didn't even know I'm going to the airport when you dropped me off.
No, I didn't. But no is the short answer. Mind you, that's how you found out you couldn't check in.
I mean, I was contributing to these delays we're talking about. As an American, I thought this whole thing was over, and sure enough, they're There I was,
There
not
you were.
able to check in.
Yeah, frantically trying to get a COVID test at short notice. They've also written to the airlines to remind them of their legal responsibilities in providing information, care and assistance, refunds and compensation. Although, I mean, I think, again, this is one of those, it's down to a certain few airlines, I think, isn't it? Because as Neville mentioned later on, I mean, you've had quite a sensible experience, shall we say, with something very similar. They've also changed the law. Now, this again I found interesting. They've also changed the law so industry has more flexibility to train staff and allow them to deploy staff more quickly and flexibly while maintaining security standards. And I think we ran a story a couple of weeks ago, I think, wasn't it, where we were talking about their reducing some of the hoops that you have to jump through in order to be able to get airside, some of which I was a bit nervous about, but they're temporary for the moment, apparently, I'm being told in my ears. They're also launching a Generation Aviation campaign, working with industry to promote awareness of aviation careers and increase the number of people applying for jobs in the sector. I mean, that can't be a bad thing, can it? And they're also working with the CAA to launch a £700,000 skills funding competition this autumn to support outreach across the sector and raise awareness of aviation careers to young people. Something that we've been championing on this podcast for many years. And they've also introduced the Airport and Ground Operations Support Scheme, AGOS, to support commercial airports and ground operations with fixed costs through to a £161 million in grants. And whilst that sounds like a really nice idea, I know a lot of the airlines especially have been quite vocal about the complete lack of support they got when they needed it, where perhaps if they've had more support, and this is the school of thought, this is why like Grant Shapps has essentially become like the enemy of the aviation industry, is because if they'd have had more support at the time of the COVID outbreak being at its height, perhaps they wouldn't have needed to have laid off so much staff. But, you know, perhaps I'm speaking out of turn there, really. But also worth noticing that the majority of UK flights continue on time and without disruption, and it does seem to only be affecting a handful of airline companies. The government thinks the issues surrounding the disruption are some passengers have faced disruption which have also occurred in the aviation sector across Europe and globally, and they reckon it's been caused by pent-up demand since the lifting of coronavirus. Everybody's desperate to get out of the country, basically, like you, Carlos. I mean, I think that was the first thing you did, wasn't it, when they lifted the restrictions, is go to Malta for a weekend.
Yeah, I'd go back
Indeed.
again tomorrow as well.
Oh, are you? What, going to
No,
Malta?
I would go back
Oh, I
tomorrow
see.
if I had the
was gonna
chance.
say, staff shortages after many workers changed their jobs during the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of people have sort of walked away from aviation, haven't they, and decided that they don't want anything to do with it. Maybe because of the lack of support they got when it did go wrong, and the time it takes to complete essential background checks and training before an employee can start to work airside. I know they're trying to do bits they can to help with that, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it's all been looked at from the perspective of a passenger, and I don't know, whilst Mr. Passenger obviously needs all the support and the guidance that they need, I do worry that a lot of this is, you know, it's all about the passenger on this one, and I still don't feel like the airlines are perhaps getting the support they need to put this problem behind us.
Would I be allowed to just say something?
Of course, yes, do.
Go, Nev, go, Nev.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is not a political point. I'm just going to say that straight away.
Okay, good.
However, a 22-point plan
Yes.
is too many. It should be 5.
Yep.
Start.
Yeah, I think that's
And
fair.
is the 1st of July 2022 the right time to be having a 22-point plan? In any case, this should have been worked out months and months ago.
February time it should have happened.
Airlines have been telling the Transport Secretary and the government for a very long time about the difficulties about switching everything back on again. They were certainly quick enough to switch it off, that was for sure. And what has happened now is that they have got an acute staff shortage across the board in all skill sets, flight deck crew, cabin crew, baggage handling, security, you name it, the whole lot. And if someone's phoning in sick because they've contracted COVID, then they're not coming in either. And I think it's a ridiculous situation to have this whole plethora of stuff, because what it will mean, I think personally, is when it all goes wrong in the next couple of months, as it obviously will, then the government will be able to fully blame the airline industry, say, well, we've given you a 22-point plan, for all the assistance and blah, blah, blah. So I'm really sorry, but the government, and it could have been the government of any colour, actually, any denomination, have acted way too late here. And bearing in mind the aviation sector has some of the biggest costs in any transport system. And the clock is ticking when that aircraft is sitting on the ground with the engine covers on.
Indeed. And that's kind of my point there. That's kind of my point there, Nev, though. I mean, this is the thing. This 22-point plan has all been at the perspective of the passenger. Very little of these points, other than pointing fingers at the aviation industry for not getting going as quickly. I mean, there seems to be a lot of sort of like, well, and perhaps I'm reading between the lines here, but I feel like it's almost like the government is saying that, you've let us down by not being ready for this.
I think that's they're trying to, they've worded it very carefully, the whole thing. And in these situations, the blame game does not work. In the generation that we're living in of social media and all the rest of it, that is a non-runner, I'm afraid. So I feel very sorry for people like John Holland-Kay, who's the chief executive of Heathrow Airport, and all the other chief execs and people around the world at different airports, because it is just awful for them at the moment.
Indeed.
Bearing in mind that these people at the operational level, generally speaking, the people that operate the baggage systems and the security, these people are not paid a lot of money at all. No. And so it's a very difficult situation. Now, I think we'll get over this, but it's going to be a little while. And of course, it's just come right at the start of the summer here in the UK and Europe as well, isn't it?
So we'll take some comments from the chat room. John's picking out a few for us. We'll start with Lee Davies. He's saying that they had the furlough scheme. They can't blame the government for everything. Airlines and airports needed more foresight. Also, that's...
And also in the chat room, Alan White was talking about having people who retired come back to work. And I'll speak a little bit to this from the American... I gotta stop saying American Airlines, from U.S. Airlines standpoint. When I was down at the Delta Training Center, they did do that. Most of the airlines have brought back those, a lot of the individuals that retired under those either furlough schemes or retirement schemes, early retirement. They are back. They're back instructing. They're back doing ground instruction. They're the simulator instructors, especially if they were still current in the airplane. And some kind of thoughts on this. Like you guys said, the blame game doesn't really help anybody. No. It's I can't believe it's already been 2 years since this whole thing started, at least the pandemic. But I guess from my standpoint, we couldn't have known. There was no way when this all started and the world shut down. There was no way to know how long it was going to last, what the outcome was going to be. I mean, over 1 million people have died, and like there were. At the time, how do you come up with any kind of scheme that is long lasting? And I think everybody was doing, I kind of agree with Micah in the chat room. He mentioned that the very quick and perhaps not so well thought out bailouts might have been a little bit of jumping the gun. It was an excellent opportunity for here in the US, at least for airlines that at least the legacy airlines to kind of reevaluate their expenses and their costs and all that. But again, there was no way to know. The Monday morning quarterback now, here we are 2 years later, and saying, hey, these things could have been done differently. But as it is right now, the simulators, the airlines are running 24/7. The instructors are running 24/7. This bounce back, while it's terrible, right? I hate that that there's people being delayed. I hate that Nev lost his luggage, and but you know what? It has created a boom in hiring, and everyone that has been wanting to be a professional pilot that otherwise had no hope, no glimmer of hope, because there was no hiring happening. That how do you get to these flight hours to be qualified to go into a legacy or a low-cost carrier? Now look at us. Now everybody that has ever wanted to be a pilot in the modern era, right, has the opportunity to do so at in the quickest way possible. Yeah. Oh, and then there was one point in that 22 pint government plan.
I prefer that version. Yeah. The 22 pint version is definitely the correct answer there.
Yeah, that came from the chat room. I like the whole advertising for jobs, because I wish I would see that around here more. Charlotte is a huge base for PSA, Piedmont, and American Airlines. I wish I would see more billboards, more advertisements for those airlines recruiting into well-paid staff, ground handling positions and ground staff positions. Let's fill that airport up, because it's a major economic center here in the city of Charlotte. I wish there was some kind of maybe government facilitated effort to hire more, right? Because the airport in Charlotte is a city airport. It's a city of Charlotte. But yeah, let's get people aware of those opportunities, those career opportunities.
Also, what was interesting, actually, John popped up a comment while we were doing that was from Captain Crew, saying, considering that the logistics industry, air, sea and land, has gone through these issues, they've gone through these issues of sudden unexpected demand, bouncing back already since mid 2020 is another story altogether. And I suppose there is an argument there, perhaps, where commercial pilots were able to, who were all being laid off left, right and centre. I suppose you had an advantage that way, where you could very easily become a cargo pilot if you were rated on the 737 as an example. Sort of quite interesting. I'd just like to finish with I'd just like to take Alex's point, actually, and it's a very honest point that he's made here, and he says, from a personally biased point of view, they have known that retirements were coming. They retired them early, but they have not contributed to training replacement staff for years, which I think is a very interesting point, and a very honest one from that. So thank you. It's a safe space here, Alex. Thank you for chipping in. It's a debate that I think will go on, and I don't suppose it will be the last time that we come back to this story. I think
I just hope this summer is not as bad as they have said it will be.
I think, honestly, it is going to be. I think it's going to be as bad as they're saying, and possibly worse. I think, and I'm all for it. I think they need to be realistic with their schedule. Yes, it means that flying will be more expensive, in the short term. But yeah, we'll have more on that later on in the show.
So, Nev, you've got the next story, and this ties in quite nicely with one of your recent experiences.
It does, doesn't it? This is from the walesonline.co.uk. It says a college rugby team touring in South Africa have been left with just the clothes on their backs after all their luggage went missing. The team of 30 players from Coleg Gwent landed in Cape Town on Monday after they flew from Heathrow via Frankfurt with Lufthansa. However, when they arrived, their suitcases were nowhere to be seen. A concerned parent said some members of the squad, made up of 16 to 18-year-olds, were left training bare-chested in their socks or even barefoot. Staff at Coleg Gwent took the boys shopping for new clothes, while South African teams helped kit them out for their first match in Cape Town.
Can I just interject there very briefly, Nev? I mean, my experience of carrying around many a rugby team, especially late at night, clothes are quite often missing by the end of the night. So I don't think this is going to worry them in any way, shape or form, if I'm honest.
I'm the last person to criticise the organisers of this, but you can fly, I think, from Heathrow to Cape Town directly,
right,
without going via. However, there's some operational reasons and maybe some cost reasons why they did it that way as well. Yeah, I mean, luggage. Now, I think with all the flying I've ever done, I've only been mishandled, as it's euphemistically called, a total of 3 times, something like that, which is not bad going in, 40 years of flying, I suppose. But of course, it did happen to us the other Saturday when we were flying from Heathrow to Faro in Portugal. I thought there was something up. The couple of things that happened which were very unusual. This was a Finnair operated A321 for BA. And they've wet leased 4 of these aircraft. Very nice crew, by the way. Really, really nice. Struggling a bit with some of the BA catering business, but nonetheless, they did a great job. And the moment we got on the plane, somebody went up, came tearing down from the back of the aircraft, a passenger, that said to the lead cabin crew lady, have my bags been loaded on? And they looked at it as if to say, come on, love, we're just doing the safety and the catering. We don't do baggage loading and all the rest of it. And Sue and I are just laughing about, oh, what a silly thing. Yeah. Anyway, of course, we get to Faro, and I thought there was something up when we left the deck at Heathrow, because even with probably a reduced power takeoff and 210 people on board this A321, it was a very short takeoff run.
Right.
And I'm thinking that's a bit quicker than I would have expected for a 2.5-hour flight with a full passenger load and a full luggage load for someone going for a week or 2 weeks. Anyway, I didn't raise the issue with Mrs. Nev at the time. However, as the carousel stopped rotating, once we got to Faro, I think there's about 100 people. 100 of us didn't get our luggage, but quite a few people did. So there's obviously some weirdness going on there. Anyway, obviously the problem at Faro is you've got to find out who is handling your luggage for you and all the rest of it. And of course, the company that was handling our luggage is actually the other side of passport control going back. So we've already gone through passport control on the way in to the baggage hall, but because you can't get back to talk to the luggage fellas and ladies. Anyway, one of the most interesting parts of this, and being a sort of a reasonably high-tech person, I should have twigged this, but I didn't. Some of the staff were saying to passengers, "Well, your stuff's on the way. It's in the baggage hall, or it'll be on this flight or that flight." And they're going, "No, it's not. I'm just looking on my phone. It tells me that it's at Heathrow Terminal 3 luggage handling area." And they're going, "Well, no, it's not true. It'll be through in a minute." And they go, "No, it won't, because I can tell you by looking at my phone exactly where it is." And of course, they had the Apple AirTag. And I thought, what a great idea. So I'd invested in a couple on Amazon, and they had arrived by the time we got back. That is a very useful way of seeing what your luggage is doing and whether you're being told
the truth.
Information. Now, there were a few people on our flight that obviously didn't get their baggage, were getting a bit stroppy with the ground handling people. And that is not the way forward, ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you. Raising voices and wagging fingers to somebody whose second language is English, probably, or maybe their third language, is not going to be a reasonable way to handle it. So Sue and I just left after about 45 minutes. It was obvious that the luggage wasn't coming out. Left and went to the hotel, and we got a very nice email from BA the next day saying, "Very sorry, your luggage is going to be on today's flight." So we thought, oh great, we shan't bother going to buy any clothes, because things were beginning to smell a bit, frankly.
Fragrant, I think is
yes,
the word. Yes,
but unfortunately it wasn't on that flight either. So it was 2.5 days later when it finally arrived at the hotel. Having said all of that, it was a bit of an adventure, and I know I will irritate hundreds of people when I say this. I quite like delays and weirdness and stuff going wrong, because A, it means I can spend more time at the airport. B, it means I can do more people watching, looking at them all getting stroppy. And C, it's just an interesting way to see how things work when it starts going wrong. But I've got to say, BA paid for the couple of Ubers we needed to go to the shops to get some clothes. They've paid for everything that we outlaid. The money actually isn't in the account yet, but they sent me a very nice letter, and it was quite a personalised one, I would say. It wasn't a standard letter, and they explained that there was some baggage handling issues at Heathrow, which I would say I would definitely agree with.
Yes, slight
so
understatement.
I've been very fortunate in that respect. But I do realise that if you're going to a wedding or you're going to something where you've got stuff in the hold, my only advice, the only time I check stuff in really is if I'm going on a long business trip or I'm going on a holiday where I'll need quite a few clothes. But just don't check stuff in at the moment, I would say, if you can possibly avoid it, because that will just be the potential for things going wrong. And you can get probably 3.5, 4 days worth of clothes in a bag that will be suitable for the overhead bins, I would say. But seeing people lose their rag is not good, and you're not going to get additional help or preferential treatment from the airline staff or the baggage handling or the ground handling agents if you do that. I wouldn't like to be doing that job right now for the next couple of months. That's going to be a very challenging situation for them. So just got to say to BA, thanks ever so much for helping us out. And I realise that all the airlines are having these difficulties, and all the ground handling folks as well. And it's not a great time, that's for sure.
No,
I think that should be point 23 in the 22 point plan. Is make sure you don't check those things that you absolutely need on your trip.
Yeah.
I actually agree with Nev entirely. And I think again, this is the people that listen to this podcast. When we fly, we always kind of have a plan, and we're always flexible in that, that aviation is one of those things that just can go wrong. And I think we tend to stay fairly calm. It is amazing. I'm with Nev on this one. I love it when the airport is in chaos. And I just sit there with like a popcorn and a pint of beer, and I just watch people make the most unreasonable requests.
I totally get where you're both coming from on this, but with my best friend being cabin crew, when you tell these stories, like, parts of me die inside, because you're thinking that poor sod is going to have to deal with these unreasonable, and it's, as I say, it's the cabin crew and the ground handling staff and the desk agents and all that kind of thing, who, as you say, are having to field these ridiculous demands, and what will eventually essentially be empty threats by the passengers. Like, if you don't get my bags here by tomorrow, then there'll be hell to pay.
Yes,
right?
I think there's probably something in the terms and conditions about consequential loss, isn't there?
Let me tell you just a really quick story. This is my own family. I'm going to call out my own mother on this. So my mom went to Cancun this last week. She was actually there for like 10 days. And we're not going to talk about it in the show, but this last weekend, U.S. Airlines canceled something like 1,700 flights over the weekend. So it's the weekend before 4th of July or 4th of Canada weekend. And my mom was in a queue. So she came from Cancun up to Dallas-Fort Worth on American Airlines. And they had canceled, I think, 700 flights that day. The queue to go to customer service, because God bless my mom, she cannot use the app. Like the app is a foreign concept to her. Was over 200 people, and I've seen that here in Charlotte at DFW at all the major hubs where customer service, there's 200 people in the queue, and you're going to be there for 4.5 hours. And she is convinced that because she raised a stink. Is that a saying?
Yeah.
Because she was like yelling at somebody that they booked her on a new flight. I'm like, Mom, that's absurd. That's the most absurd thing. That computer, if you were to manually book 10,000 passengers, you'd still be sitting in Cancun. Like, not that that's a bad place to sit, but she is one of those people. She was convinced that because she was up in arms and she was yelling at somebody that they rebooked her, and that's just uninformed. She's an uninformed 78-year-old traveler.
I mean,
I quantified it just to give my mom a little leeway, right? Because
okay, we're gonna move on now. Armando, I think you've got the next story.
okay, this one came from a couple different places in the industry. It's from simpleflyingindustryupdate.com, seekingalpha.com. Embraer, the British aircraft manufacturer, has just signed an agreement with Toyota of Brazil in order to embrace Toyota's production system, its principles, its concepts in industrial operations. So this initiative takes aim at eliminating waste, obtaining and maximizing operational efficiency, and increasing the value generation for stakeholders. So this initial phase is going to see Toyota Production System, or TPS, specialists immersed in Embraer's daily operations at their main plant in São José dos Campos in Sao Paulo. And the TPS specialists are going to devise some improvements for production lines, manufacturing the E-Jet, the E-Jet E2 families, amongst others. So Embraer has already drawn heavily on the principle of Kaizen, which is a Japanese concept of continuous improvement through employee involvement from the CEO all the way down to the assembly line. In 2020, there were 1,600 Kaizen projects completed, plus close to another 6,000 employee initiatives from Embraer's Good Idea program, which actually the Air Force has too, the US Air Force. Those were implemented. And in 2021, in the middle of all this COVID, supply chain distribution, all these delays, Embraer reduced the production time by around 17% and targets a 40% total reduction by the end of 2023. So as you guys know, Toyota, right, one of the world's largest manufacturers, not of just cars, but everything, right? Toyota makes all kinds of industrial machines. The automotive industry has been at the forefront of lean operations and automation and robotics with human intervention. And when I first read this story, what I first thought about was Boeing's woes with their manufacturing processes, their foreign object debris being found on deliveries of aircraft, right? You are going to eliminate all of this. Plus, I think traditionally, the manufacturing of aircraft and aviation has been very human heavy, but that also leads to waste and mistakes. So I think learning from the automotive industry on standardized production and lean processes is going to be one of these things that we're just talking about right now, right? To as we're coming out of the pandemic, to help aviation, produce in a more lean way. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think,
good idea.
Well, one of the problems has been, I think a lot of people have said, actually, with regard to, the Boeing situation as an example. I know we're not talking about that specifically here, but just an example. With the acquisition of McDonnell Douglas, things changed a lot. It would seem. So I think the major manufacturers are under great pressure to deliver aircraft in a timely manner, and if they can't do it with their own resources, and that they have the ability to partner with others, for example, who do have production efficiency, track records that are really good, then that's not a bad thing. I suppose the thing to remember, of course, is that, it is all about safety at the end of the day. That is the number one priority of any aircraft manufacturer. But it's an interesting angle to see what Embraer are doing here. And I will be interested to see the result of this in a few years' time, to see whether it really has helped them.
I'm surprised we didn't get here before, to be honest.
Yeah. Fair point.
Carlos, you got the next story. It's going to be a fun one for us. You're going to love this.
Yeah, this next story, I found this actually last night. I was reading about this last night, and I checked up on it again today on the actual website. But this is from fselite.net and the Pilot Club. And The Pilot Club launches online flight school. So, online flight simulation community, the Pilot Club, has recently announced the launch of their new online flight school. The Pilot Club are an official VATSIM partner and VATSIM authorized training organization, and have developed an online school videos, flight school videos and resources combined with practical flight training to align VATSIM P1 training. VATSIM's pilot ratings range from PO, basic member, to P4 and air transport pilot license, or ATPL. VATSIM's P1 rating, which is aligned with the real world PPL syllabus covering flight fundamentals and VFR flying. And to be awarded a VATSIM pilot rating, the student pilot must complete a set of training curriculum and pass both written and practical examinations. The online flight school is free. That's the most important part of this story. It's all Pilot Club members, so you just have to join up on their website. And so VATSIM, I've used it myself, not many times. I tend to just kind of do my own thing. So VATSIM is a system that's used by not just Microsoft Flight Simulator people, but also people who use X-Plane 11 as well. And it's kind of an online, real-world kind of platform you can log into with your game while you're running your X-Plane or your Microsoft Flight Sim game. You can log onto the VATSIM network, and you can have 9 times out of 10 actual real-world air traffic controllers or pilots actually on there, based at the airports within the sim, giving you real-time directions. And it's a very, very big network. There are hundreds of thousands of people who are part of the VATSIM network. It's also very interesting just to sit there and listen to. Actually, it's very interesting indeed. But this whole flight sim thing, I think, is a fantastic idea, because it's free, and because they are basing it on the real world PPL. You could technically do your training on here and pass that knowledge that you've gained onto the real world when you actually do your PPL in real life. It's a great thing. I was reading up online. If you check out the website, I'll put the get Matt to put the link to the website on the show notes. But they have also on the Pilot Club website, if you go on there, there are actual meetups online at specific dates and times where you can actually do they actually have fly-ins. So you can actually have a fly-in they've got one coming up in July to Alaska, where you can actually fly in with your Piper Cub, your Cessna 150, 172 aircraft. There's also one, they've got an air show flying as well, which is all controlled by the VATSIM network and using your home sim. So it's a honestly great learning tool. I am going to sign up for it. I'm going to give it a go and see how I get on. But Armando, have you had a chance to have a look at this?
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent for using flight simulators, especially if you have all you need is a simple setup in your home. You don't need the throttle quadrant. You don't need Carlos's 737 cockpit. To be honest, all you need is an Xbox controller and a headset and flight simulator or X-Plane. But I'm a huge proponent of using simulation, home simulation in all kinds of training, whether it's your PPL. I think PPL it can be a little bit misleading or dangerous, because a lot of doing your private pilot, in my opinion, is feeling the airplane. It's getting those stick and rudder skills. But where it's really, really most beneficial, I think, is in your instrument rating. And Alex Robinson in the chat room said that he used VATSIM for his instrument rating, and it helped. For me, it helped with instrument currency and proficiency when I was stationed overseas. I'm going to offer up, so VATSIM is a great product. I'm going to offer up a different one, which is called Pilot Edge. Pilot Edge, so there's a little bit of difference between the two, in that VATSIM is slightly more recreational, more fun than Pilot Edge. Pilot Edge is actually used by a lot of instrument flight schools and training programs because it's a little bit more realistic. So like you were saying, Carlos, VATSIM has a worldwide coverage, I believe. Pilot Edge will focus on specific regions, namely California and the West Coast, where their controllers are just as familiar with that kind of with the real airspace as a real controller would be, knowing all of the waypoints, all the initial approach fixes for instrument approaches. So I guess before I go on, the other place where it helps out is if you're a professional pilot and you're about to go into a new airplane, sit in a flight simulator or X-plane and go through the motions. I've actually had first officers that I've trained in mostly the Pilatus, that's our entry-level aircraft into the charter industry. And I'll tell them, hey, go get this set up, go get X-plane, buy this, the Caronado software PC-12 upgrade, and then join Pilot Edge or VATSIM, and it makes them a much more proficient pilot. But I want to give you a little bit of so Pilot Edge has similar to VATSIM, but being much more instrument oriented, Pilot Edge also has what they call I ratings. And I'll give you a couple examples. So I rating category 1. So like your first one is just an IFR flight in Southern California using a specific instrument approach. And they tell you like, here's the game plan. Here's the completion standards. For example, let's see, instrument rating flight number 4, I-04, ATC, the controllers pick the destination, you find it, you file it, and you fly the correct route, including any instrument departures and arrivals. They introduce SIDS and stars. They do full precision approaches, full non-precision approaches. Each one of these is its own rating. And, even practicing NDB ARC approaches, if you want to, if it still exists out there, then you can do that with a real controller on a simulator, and you're flying it in real time, so you have to process. So it's your choice if you want to fly it in a Cessna 172, if you want to fly it in a Caravan, or you want to go full Carlos and fly it in a 737. You're the one that's going to have to deal with the speed of things as they go along and be able to set up and fly the approach correctly, or at least fly the route correctly. So it's just such a great resource if you're a young pilot or even an old pilot getting back into it, and you have the tech ability to set up a flight simulator. The ultimate would be virtual reality. If you've got a Microsoft, not flight simulator, I don't think that's VR ready right now, but X-plane with VR goggles, that it's a completely immersive experience, and that would be the ultimate without having to have all the peripheral controls that Carlos and I have.
Just a couple of points. Richard Adams has said in the chat room something that's actually very true. So he's saying that if he's found that real life scenery add-ons are helpful for getting the feel of airfield orientation when going in somewhere new, real arrival then seem more familiar. That's very true. I downloaded the East of England, Southern, and the Central England pack for X-Plane 11, and flying into London City Airport with the correct scenery package makes it a completely different approach into London City, and you actually have to fly the aircraft. Also, X-Plane 12 is literally just around the corner from being, I think it's being released in beta version or beta first.
I think so, yeah.
And yeah,
I did that exact same thing. Just as much flying, real world flying as I've been doing, I sat in a simulator because I had a flight last Saturday, I think it was. Google it, everybody. The airport designator is November 30. Tiny little airstrip, 2,600 feet.
30.
Yeah, it's in the middle of the mountains in Pennsylvania, and it was an airfield that, just based on my flight planning, I said, well, we're only going to go in there and pick up these passengers if it's, clear weather, VFR conditions, but not a lot of room. And I sat there on X-plane in the PC-12, and I chair flew it. Is that the right grammar? I chair flight it. Yeah. And it helped a lot going into the actual airfield.
Alan is very grateful of this conversation, by the way, if you just take a look at that.
He needs to renew his IR before the end of July.
Very good. Very timely. Very timely.
No, I'd love it. I'm very much looking forward to X-Plane 12 coming out, because it's going to be a Microsoft flight sim killer. I personally believe.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
So, Matt, you've got the next one, and it's sad news for a firm based here in the UK.
Yeah, we're not going to go into too much detail because it's all a little bit up in the air. But basically, we've sort of heard on the grapevine, as it were, that the Dorset Aviation. I forgot to change my cat. There we go. Sorry, Dorset Aviation. I remember I'll do this in a minute. Dorset Aviation firm falls into administration. So it's coming from several sources. This one, Dorset Live, the Times.co.uk, and the Gazette as well. An 82-year-old aviation company based at Bournemouth International Airport has fallen into administration. AIM Aviation boasts Airbus, Boeing, Virgin and Emirates amongst its impressive customer list. According to the Times, the business went through a pre-pack administration last week and was bought by ACS UK, another division of AVIC, which means the Chinese government will take overall control of the firm, reports the Business Aviation Live. The company, which was based in 1940 under the name W. Henshaw and Sons, designs and manufactures cabin interiors for helicopters and planes, including lounges, bars, seats and galleys. It also makes interiors for military aircraft. Altitude has 600 staff and has been owned by the state-controlled Aviation Industry Corporation of China since 2016. AVIC paid £155 million for the company at the time. Additional information on this one here. Basically in 2016 the company went into going into at the moment it's going into what they call a pre-pack arrangement in terms of insolvency. And that basically means the sale or part of a company's business and or assets is negotiated and agreed before an insolvency practitioner is appointed with the relevant documentation being signed and implemented immediately or shortly after the appointment is made. Now, there are some benefits and some sort of, there's some goods and some bad points about that. From the business perspective, business continuity, value protection, job preservation, and reduced costs, because it's all been agreed, if you like, before the administrator is appointed. There are some concerns, however, because of a lack of transparency, insufficient marketing of the incident, and there is an argument for a conflict of interest. So, essentially, ministers have been urged to intervene on this one because there seems to be some nervousness, I suppose. So Conservative MP Bob Seeley, for example, is quoted as saying that China wants to know as much about our defence industries as possible. We need to be less naive about totalitarian states. I mean, that's a very, very bold statement on their point. I don't know. Perhaps this is not really a conversation people are comfortable about having. But are concerns over the security real? I mean, are they right on here? Is Bob Seeley correct? Should we be worried about takeovers of this nature?
I'll just say, who are we? 5G, as an example, where the government pulled the relationship with the Chinese over that infrastructure, for example.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, this is a private situation. It's a private firm that's gone into administration.
Albeit sad, because it's
it is. And if it can legally be bought by somebody else, there's no reason why it couldn't be. I think ministers probably should spend a bit more time on dealing with some of the issues.
A 22-point plan, for example.
A 22-point plan or misconduct in a public office.
Oh, hello, right. We've gone political all of a sudden. Panic.
No.
Alleged. Do we have to say the word alleged when stuff? I'm never quite sure.
I just don't know anymore.
No, indeed. Yeah, as I say, it's a brief story, but I just really wanted to sort of mention it because it sort of goes back a little bit to what we were talking about earlier, which was the concern over governments meddling in the aviation industry, essentially. And yeah, sad story when a company like this, one that's been around for so long as well, has gone into administration. You know, boasting big clients and stuff. I mean, you can't help but wonder, you know, where it all went wrong, really. To be honest, but there we go. Yeah, we'll move on.
Nev, you've got the next one, all about fees.
Yes, running an airport is not a cheap piece
Is it
of work.
not?
No.
Oh,
I've established that. So we look at aerotime.aero, travelandtourworld.com and routesonline.com. It says that London's Heathrow Airport is told to cut fees by regulators. The Civil Aviation Authority released its final proposals for the maximum charges Heathrow will be allowed to assess airlines over the next 5 years. Under the proposals, the average maximum price per passenger that airlines would pay Heathrow would fall from £30.19, which is currently, to £26.31 in 2026. When the effects of inflation are removed, this is equivalent to nearly a 6% reduction every year from 22 to 26, the CAA said. The move to reduce charges is seen as a response to airline protests at the scale of Heathrow's own proposed increase in charges. The hub had wanted to double the fee it charged airlines. This has sparked fury, of course, from the major airlines, including British Airways and Virgin Atlantic, with the CEO of London Heathrow, John Holland Kay, accusing the CAA of failing to understand how much funding is required to operate a major airport. And Clive Ratton, who's the CEO of Business Travel Association, welcomed the CAA's proposals but added that the price reductions don't go far enough. Interested parties will now submit responses to the CAA, and the final ruling is expected in the autumn. Just as a matter of interest, just plucking some figures from some various sources online, Heathrow's operating costs, or the financial statistics and the operating costs in 2018 were £1.87 billion, and in 2019 were £1.92 billion. I would imagine that's going to go up year on year, I would imagine. So how do airports make money? I mean, apart from, you know, the landing fees and all the rest of it, you would imagine. But, of course, the real estate of airports, they normally have a couple of runways and some infrastructure, but it's all about the shopping experience for the most part, isn't it? And the retail part of it. That's a big part of the airlines, the airport's income, I would imagine.
And those leases are big money. I mean, they're not cheap, are they? They're mega bucks for, you know, if Weatherspoons want to put a 2-floor Weatherspoons in. I mean, that is a, you know, other companies.
Having said all of that, I don't, the clothing shops, for example. Now, obviously, I don't frequent these very much, as you can tell by how I'm dressed today.
You're not a regular visitor to Primani then, or anything?
No.
Right.
But I was just thinking about the number of people that I see clothes shopping in airports. It's not very many. People are normally in the restaurants and bars and. You know, those kind of things, or the luggage areas, or the places to pick up a mains transformer or a plug adapter or something like that. Interesting. But no, that they've got a hard time. It's almost an impossible situation for them, balancing the needs of the airport running costs versus what they're going to charge the airlines. And of course, who pays for it in the end? It's you and me, the passenger.
True. And they're still making profits. I mean, they're big profits they're talking about there.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I mean,
the operating costs. Sorry, yeah.
They have to. You know, they've got very large fixed standing operating costs. If you can just imagine the whole infrastructure of any airport, actually, how much it costs just to turn the lights on in the morning, let alone anything else. So yeah.
Indeed.
So, Armando, you have got the next story all about collisions.
Yeah, and I think I missed the live recording of APG. I think they may have talked about this, but Captain Nick just released the artwork, which makes me think they actually talked about this one. So this was a ETA A330 that still took off. Well, it had already taken off It continued its flight after a purported collision with an Air France 777 at John F. Kennedy Airport in New York. This happened on June 17, and specifically it was Boeing 777, Air France Boeing 777-200 with a registration code of Foxtrot Golf Sierra Papa Quebec. It had just arrived from Paris on Air France 8. And then the 10-year-old ITA Airways Airbus A330-200. This plane was departing for Rome, performing ITA Flight 611. So this was originally reported when the Air France pilot contacted JFK ground controllers and informed them that he said Alitalia. So this guy must not listen to our podcast. But Alitalia no longer exists. But he said Alitalia passing behind us hit their aircraft so that the ground controller could call ahead and tell ITA not to take off. So there was some confusion, which we're about to hear. Matt is going to play the video from Baz Aviation. There was a little bit of confusion. There was a little bit of a language barrier because I think both pilots were talking about Alitalia, and the controller said, "Are you sure it's Alitalia? Because that's not a thing anymore." And then probably the language barrier and whatever that they couldn't figure out where exactly they were parked. I mean, the Air France guy knew where where he was parked, but the tower didn't really know. Anyway, eventually Air France is told to call the JFK tower so they could get a hold of the ITA flight to let them know that they may have had some damage. Either way, they chose to continue the flight. So Matt, let's listen to the audio real quick. It's only 3 minutes long.
So it's saying on the caption, an Alitalia transporter Airbus A330-200 was involved in an incident.
Air France 008 is calling Graham. Say again? Route from Air France 008, please answer. Hello, good evening. How can I help you? This is your first time calling me? Yes, this is Air France 008. We are on standard 9, and there is an Alitalia passing behind us that hit our aircraft. It's very dangerous for him not to take off. Can you say this again, please? You're saying that the Alitalia aircraft hit you? Where are you? This Alitalia was to take off. Better to control the takeoff. Okay, where are you? Did you copy for the Alitalia? I don't know which Alitalia. Okay, where are you, Alitalia? This is Air France 008. We got a damage from an Alitalia passing behind on standard 9. I'm not aware that the pilots where they are damaged the aircraft. Are you sure it was Alitalia? Yes, the good staff told me it was an Alitalia. Air France, where are you? We are at the gate number 9. Gate number 9. Air France 008. I would like you to call the tower, please. Yes, Air France 008 has returned, and for you to stop the takeoff from Alitalia because he has damaged his aircraft. Air France 008, please call. You ready to copy the phone number? Air France 008, please. Yes, area code 718 656 718 656. Okay.
It's 611 Heavy.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Just to let you know, another aircraft on the ground currently, Air France, said that you hit them or something of that nature while you were taxiing. Did you experience any damage to the aircraft?
Negative, sir.
Okay, sir. It's 611 Heavy. Just thought I'd ask you just to make sure. Contact New York departure, please.
New York departure, it's 611. Ciao.
I mean,
I can't believe how I just can't get over how it's just like, yeah, he hit me, yeah, I'll just carry on then, yeah, sorry.
I mean, there's so many questions in there. The bit that's bothering me the most here is like, It's almost like the ground handlers weren't taking him seriously for a minute. I mean, how many times was it? I mean, I know nothing about aviation or JFK Airport, but I know damn well that he was at stand 9. I mean, why did
Not to mention, it doesn't really matter how many Alitalia or ITA flights could be taking off at that time.
And presumably they must have known that they were, they should have been aware that one was taxiing at that moment, for example. But all the I don't know. And again, perhaps I'm being naive here. I mean, all the focus seemed to be on like querying the Air France. Like, it was only really sort of 3 minutes later. Well, I mean, to be honest with you, he could have been dispatched in the air
with bits hanging off.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that a bit more direct conversation would have been better from the Air France fellas? Mayday, mayday, mayday. We have been involved in a collision on stand 9 or whatever it is.
Right.
That gets everybody's attention straight away, as happened on JFK ground a few years ago when a British Airways pilot spotted a fire underneath one of the engines on an aircraft which was on a stand. And that was his opening gambit. And we don't get this, I'll give you a number to call business. That's just ridiculous.
That just seems so bizarre.
These are safety critical situations.
I can't believe that he gave him a phone number either. First of all, you're assuming that the French pilot, 1, has their phone on him, 2, has an international plan, which, good assumption that they may, but why would you give him a phone number to the tower? Sure, it's going to be a direct, but those are critical, like you guys are all saying, those are critical seconds that are passing by.
Yeah.
And the Italian flight was still on the ground. And if on the VAS Aviation video, they received their takeoff clearance based on the timestamps while this whole conversation was happening on the ground of phone numbers and where are you parked and this and that. They actually received a takeoff clearance that could have been prevented.
So, I mean, forgive my naivety here, Armando, but what was the status? Had there been a collision, and was there any kind of risk to the Alitalia flight? I mean, obviously the Air France one wasn't going anywhere. He was clearly going to be remaining at gate 9 for the foreseeable future, by the sound of it. But
so there was a collision just on July 1st, which is I think today, right? Is this first or is this second?
It is the first, yeah.
Yep. So the NTSB reported that there was, in fact, a collision between the A330 and the Air France 777. This happened at night, and there's so much that is confusing here, right? So obviously, it's possible that they maybe just clipped one of the carbon fiber wingtips out there, and that the Italian flight didn't know it. They can't see that far out onto the wing at night. I don't know. I think most airplanes you can look out the window and see all the way out to the wingtip, because that's why they paint them, because they're branded. So there was another really quirky point in that from FlightAware, the Italian A330 was waiting for takeoff for over 30 minutes before it was time for their takeoff. Yet the pilots were only made aware of this after the plane was airborne, obviously because the crazy conversation going on here. There is a possibility that the pilots performed an inspection after the incident happened and they said we're good to go. That is very unlikely. I think any pilot, and this is actually kind of surprising to me, that after being informed of the damage or potential damage, that they continued the flight. That's
you'd have thought the first thing they'd do would stop, wouldn't you? And you think, oh crikey, okay, we better just, even if it's just a walk round, for goodness sake, and just sort of make sure there's nothing. All right, maybe where they are they can't, and they'll have to taxi back. And all right, there's going to be passengers who are annoyed because they aren't now taking off and all that kind of thing. But
they were already airborne when they were informed of the collision, which kind of so that kind of induces another set of problems, as they were probably over their landing weight. So a return would have involved flying, holding, dumping fuel, coming back to JFK for an inspection. But as a professional pilot, I think most air crews would do that too. I don't know that most everyone truck like off across the Atlantic with potential damage to an airplane. You're right in that the French pilot could have been a little bit more clear. I think he was being French nice, right? They're very polite, but he could have been more clear in saying prevent the Italian flight from taking off or something like that. But
I mean, as Nev has quite eloquently put in our little group chat during this, it's like it's the giving of a telephone number. I mean, forgive my naivety here, but presumably you can radio the tower.
Oh, sure. That would have been absolutely the most direct way.
Yeah.
Plus, I mean, the ground controller has a direct line to the tower.
Right. This is why I feel like almost the ground handler was like almost didn't believe the story. Do you know? I mean, it was the whole sort of dismiss. As you say, perhaps there could have been more emergency, and if he'd have said "Mayday, Mayday," as Nev said at the start of our discussion, then maybe that would have triggered, you know, a more serious response. Because also, as a professional pilot, you wouldn't muck around on the ground and use the words "Mayday, Mayday" unless you meant it.
Yeah, and there's a place like JFK has multiple tower frequencies for different runways, has multiple ground frequencies for different parts of the airport, has ramp control frequencies. So I'm not sure. What I don't know is, was Air France talking to a ramp controller, which is a little bit different because that's controlled by an airline, or were they talking to ground control, which is an FAA position generally sat right next to the towers,
right?
Controller, or the final controller. So a little bit more. Richard Adams is asking, Miles High was asking, was the damage on Air France identified? Yeah, I think that airplane ended up staying on the ground for 3 days.
Wow.
They repaired some things. Yeah, so there was actual damage to that. Richard Adams is asking about the Italian engineers when that aircraft arrived, and was it being kept quiet? I think there was a small delay of that tail number, but it was back in the air within a day, I believe.
Right. I mean, it probably, as you say, it probably was just like the tiniest little clip or something like that, and perhaps because he was standing on, but you know, because the Air France one was stationary and on its stand and all that kind of thing, it probably felt the little clip quite significantly, as well perhaps if it's, you know, as where if the other one is rolling for getting to the runway, you know, you've got all sorts of vibrations going on every moment, haven't you, when you're taxiing out to the, because they're not the smoothest of things, these runways, are they? They're not exactly, you know, perfectly paved tarmac or anything like that.
That's very nice of you to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think most professional pilots would have dumped gas and turned around and had the damage inspected.
Okay,
even if there was no damage.
Okay, fair enough.
Perplexing.
Yeah, a very odd thing. I think that's the best way to describe that. A very, very odd thing.
So Nev, you've got the next story, and this airline is trying out some new beds.
They are. It's on gatechecked.com, and it says that Air New Zealand has announced a number of cabin upgrades expected to be introduced on its fleet of Boeing 787s from 2024, including bunk beds on some of its ultra-long models. The airline has been hard at work developing a series of new products for its various classes based on customer feedback. According to the airline, passengers sought interests like the importance of sleep and need for more comfort and space. Well, we all like that, don't we? The following changes are expected to be introduced to the 787 fleet from 2024 via new deliveries and retrofits. The Dash 10s are expected to replace their older 777s. We actually covered this way back on episode 307 a couple of years ago, and since then there's been over 2,500 hours of customer research with 300 different people, and everyone's got a different opinion, I'm sure. So this is going to be a good question. How are they going to do this? Because they're going to have to make up the revenue somehow, aren't they, between the lost seats that they would have versus perhaps the increased weight involved. Or is it only going to be offered to the premium cabins? Lots of
it's going to be premium.
Lots of accountants will be getting their calculators out and sucking through their teeth, I would imagine, the prospect of an even higher premium price for the tickets. What do you think, guys?
I mean, I love the idea of it. There's no two ways about it. I mean, it's I think the only thing that makes me nervous is that they're probably not going to be the most roomiest of things.
Well, from some of the pictures, it looks pretty roomy. But I think that where Air New Zealand's going to attack this is, so you can't legally occupy the bed for takeoff and landing, but they're going to sell the time slots on the bed for up to 4 hours. So it's basically almost like the minute suites concept that's popping up here in the US, but you're going to have a time slot during your flight that you can go up and basically sleep, get a couple hours sleep up to 4, and then I'm sure, like Nev is saying, this will be at a premium, but somebody will probably pay for it, especially on these really long flights, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if you haven't got, for example, again, because they're going to be pitched at a much lower price than business class, for example, aren't they?
Yeah.
So,
dear. I love Lee Davies. Is it Lee Davies' comment? Hold on. Yeah, Richard Adams. Sorry, Richard Adams' comment in the chat room. He says, "Looks like a morgue."
Nicely lit, though.
It's a lovely lit morgue.
Or hot bunking in the Navy. You may just meet a friend.
Oh,
yeah. For me and you, Matt, that'll be airbeds in economy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll take that. Richard Adams says, "I used to fall out of the top bunk on the ground. Imagine the same in turbulence." Yes, good point. Good point, well made, as they say. But so we're going to move on to a fight.
This is all great until you get the guy that snores.
Neville have hammocks in seat 1A between two palm trees.
That's an idea.
Yeah, I think he's on board with that one. Oh dear. Right, should we move on to the last story then?
Yes, the last story and finally story. Come to us from ABC News. It's a nice story to finish the commercial news on. Airline captain writes a note to Tooth Fairy for girl who lost her tooth on a plane. I mean, we've all done it. On a recent flight from New York to South Carolina, a little girl lost a valuable possession. But it wasn't her luggage or a toy. That special something was one of her bottom teeth. Lena said she hadn't expected her tooth to fall out during the flight, and their flight on June the 17th from New York to Greenville, Spartanburg International Airport in Greene, South Carolina, a city about 93 miles southwest of Charlotte, North Carolina, was their last flight after a 36-hour delay in New York on their way home from Norway. She said, "We tried to walk back to the airplane, but security said it was closed. It was 2 a.m. And Lena said, adding that she was very emotional and crying when she realized what had likely happened. Usually, Lena said she puts her baby teeth under her pillow for the tooth fairy to pick up. But after losing her tooth in the sky this time, she had nothing to leave behind. So, standing in, the legendary captain himself, Captain Josh Duchow, seeing Lena's distress, offered to write a note to the Tooth Fairy himself instead to explain the situation. He put, "Dear Tooth Fairy, Lena had a tooth fall out on her flight to Greenville," wrote Duchow, who piloted the flight. "Please take this note in place of her tooth." And he signed the note, Captain Josh.
Now, I mean, speaking as, like if you're a parent and you've received that note, I mean, that must just feel such a lovely thing to do. Do you know what I mean? Because the daughter would understandably be very distressed about all that, because it's traumatic enough losing a tooth, never mind losing I don't know what the going rate is for the Tooth Fairy these days. I mean, it was 20p when I last lost a tooth. But
it's like a fiver in this house.
Is it? Oh my goodness! Wow.
Inflation.
Okay.
But we don't talk politics.
No, of course. Indeed. So yeah, but I just think this is such a lovely thing to do, isn't it?
PR.
It's absolutely, and they've only taken a moment or two out of out of the pilot's day, but to just sort of recognise the situation and an authoritative letter to the to send it off. Send off is brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Excellent. Just look at the comments in the chat room. The plain tooth. Very good, Miles. Very good, Miles. Yes. So that is where we bring the military segment to a close, and we are going to move very swiftly on. Commercial to a close. Blimey. Yes. We're going to move swiftly.
You'll be upsetting Mr. Warning.
I know. With our caption, it's just for fun. Now Matt's going to pop it up on the screen. And Nev, you're going to give us a quick description of what the picture is this week for caption this.
Well, the number 2 engine appears to actually, is it a number 2 engine? It's probably number 1 engine, isn't it?
Number 1.
Yeah, sorry. Number 1 engine is full of what looks like the top of a latte coffee, and this has given our listeners and viewers immense scope for comments, as you can imagine.
So, kicking off this week is James says ExpressJet is merging with Starbucks to make a new company introducing Espresso Jet coffee lines and their new slogan, "Let us give you a lift in more ways than one."
James also says there has been a very, very high relative humidity today, so for your in-flight entertainment we have added cream and coffee to the engines, and during takeoff you will see a lovely cappuccino.
Bob says a pilot shortage leads to baristas being recruited straight from aircraft. One is quoted as saying, making a double shot half oat latte with chocolate on top is harder than this fly-by-wire thing.
That's weird. How did Bob know my coffee order?
There you go.
Well, quite.
John says a creative Rolls-Royce apprentice takes wide chord blade blending to a whole new level.
Yes, ain't that the truth?
And Steve says sustainable aviation fuel trials, day 3, Jamaican blend.
Very good. Jenny from Rome says Italy, here we come.
Dari says, "Hey Joe, give me the emergency checklist for a cafe macchiato."
Neil says a new low Costa
airline.
Oh,
Neil!
See what you did there.
Like that one. And sorry, our American listeners won't get that. It's like Dunkin' Donuts.
And
it's like Starbucks. Let's be
Steve says that this is how Qantas will operate Project Sunrise and ensure crew wakefulness.
One way of dealing with it. Paul says the new Latte Pacific livery.
Dear.
Bill says new CEO catering engine option development units. Number 1 does the coffee. Number 2 does the biscotti.
The biscotti's very important there, I think.
Yeah, oh hell yeah.
Matt says it's the new Boeing 777 with Trent 800 shot latte.
Ooh, very good.
James says it was crazy. We were taxiing to the gate, yada yada yada. The engine is dripping creamy frappuccino.
Oh dear, bit of a crisis there. Simon says the closest you will ever get to a decent cup of coffee on a plane.
Oh.
And Bill says original flight was cancelled, but they put me on the latte flight.
See what they did there? Yeah, very good.
Different James says this Jettuccino is generally eclectic. We got some good ones in the chat room.
Go on and hit us with the chat room.
Let's see. Miles High says the high bypass blend, please. Another one from Miles says Rolls Royce orange mocha frappuccino.
Easy for you to say, apparently.
Mazus is saying that would need 1 large sugar cube.
Indeed. Going back to Micah's, do please look at the screen, Carlos, rather than the chat room.
Excuse me. Someone started at the bottom.
Main man Micah says, I like my coffee very hot. Alan's is quite funny.
And a hark back, actually, Richard Adams is a hark back to one of the stories we ran a few years back. That's one hell of a lot of lucky pennies being thrown in.
Oh, I see. Yeah. Yeah, and sorry, what was the one before, John? Sorry, you're really making poor John work for his for a living today, aren't you?
For his coffee.
Yeah, indeed. He's saying Java A1. Java A1? Is that
Java
right?
A1.
Yeah. And Richard Adams is saying, so that's grounds control for you. Grounds control. No? Okay. Just me.
So
Fair
don't
enough.
forget, every Wednesday or Thursday, depending on how late I get it to it, on Facebook, we put our picture up. So if you check us out on Facebook, don't forget to give us a like and follow us on Facebook, and check out our caption this next week. So
That's one of the best ones we've had for a while, isn't it?
oh, it's very good. So over to Armando for the next part of the show.
Yeah, Jonathan Wormer, I'm going to send you a special video with the third story, which we're officially going to cut because it's going to take way too long. So we're only going to bring you 2 stories this week. Matt, if you're ready, let's hit the button.
What's up, Buggies? 13550, Angel 16, heading 340. Okay. 100 St. Buggy.
All right, this first military story is coming to us from thedrive.com. Congress is pushing the Air Force for more EC-37 electronic warfare jets. So this U.S. Air Force could be looking for an important boost to its future aerial EW, electronic warfare capabilities, after members of the U.S. House of Representatives moved to add $37 billion to the proposed defense budget for fiscal year 2023 this week. This added spending plan includes over $800 million, almost $900 million to acquire 4 more EC-37B Compass Call electronic warfare jets, which would bring the planned fleet of these airplanes to 14. This would equate to a 1-for-1 replacement of the current EC-130H Compass Call aircraft. The House voted 42-17 this week to include this proposed $37 billion spending package. Now, these new Gulfstream 550, G550-based Compass Call jets are going to offer advantages in speed, endurance, and altitude, and, of course, ease of sustainment over the present fleet of C-130H-based aircraft, which have been probably around since the early 80s, maybe even late 70s. These new jets will also feature improved electronic warfare capabilities, including a greater standoff range, according to L3 Harris, which is the platform integration provider. Don't worry, I'm going to explain all of this as soon as I'm done reading. Previous iterations of the EC-130-based Compass Call system have proven their value in combat on multiple occasions. I would argue on hundreds and possibly thousands of occasions over the past 2 decades. A contingent of these aircraft were continuously forward deployed to the Middle East, where they also supported operations in Afghanistan and Iraq and in the Middle East, in East Africa between 2001 and 2021. EC-130Hs supported the raid that eventually led to the death of Osama bin Laden in Pakistan in 2011, and also prevented a detonation of an improvised explosive device, or an IED, which were lethal in these Middle East conflicts, that would have killed then Major General James Mattis, who eventually became Secretary of Defense. So the EC-37s, no matter how many of them the Air Force ultimately acquires, do look to be an important component of what the American forces will be able to bring to combat in the next couple years. They, of course, just one layer of the overall very diverse electronic warfare. They call it an ecosystem within the U.S. military. So, does anybody know what an EC-130 or an EC-37B does?
Flies.
It does do that. So this Compass Call aircraft has been around for maybe 30 years. The Compass Call name and the Compass Call mission was traditionally a jamming platform. So it could jam public radios, right? So if you think about when you're about to invade a country, one of the most or one of the easiest ways for the government to get information out to their citizens or bad guys would be through their radio. So they had the ability to jam those communications. They had the ability to jam just regular communications. Carlos, are you guys radio dispatched in your logistics warehouse, or is it just all cell phones now?
No, so it's all cell phones.
Yeah. So if you think about, major logistics movements such as taxi cabs in London, that kind of digital communication, or even our Amazon Prime trucks driving around here, that's all digital communications. If you had the ability to deny service to all of those things, you could, well, applying it to a military standpoint, you could basically bring communication within a foreign adversary's military to its knees by just denying it, and that's what this airplane does. Now, in after 9/11, these airplanes found another mission, which was preventing the detonation of IEDs. As you guys probably know, IEDs were incredibly deadly to all of the coalition forces. And I would say the majority of the casualties from the last 20 years conflict happened from IEDs. And this airplane was able to jam the radio waves, preventing the detonation of those IEDs. So why the Gulfstream? EC-130s, like I said, have been around since the 80s. The airplanes have been around since the 80s, just like we were talking about earlier on the show. It's 4 turboprop engines with a crew of almost 20 people on board. The Gulfstream-based platform, the G550-based platform, can do it much more efficiently, higher, longer, with a crew of 4, with a lot more airborne networking and digital communication. So that's why we are replacing these, 40-year-old aircraft with brand new Gulfstreams. Thoughts? That's what I thought.
It's very grey. It's very grey.
Yeah, it is very good.
I mean, you've explained it so brilliantly, and I feel terrible because I'm still sat here going, no clue.
I'll come up with a different analogy.
Okay, go on then.
And we'll talk about it offline.
Oh, okay. All right, fair enough. Yeah.
So the next story in the military segment this week will spark interest with many people who have seen the latest Top Gun Maverick film. There is no spoilers, no. This
writing, please.
No spoilers, because it's in the,
I haven't
it's in
seen
the
it
teaser.
yet.
It's in the trailer.
I've only seen the film twice. I'm going to go back a third time, though. Lockheed Martin lifts the lid on Top Gun Dark Star's hypersonic jet concept. So lauded for its compelling action sequences and exhilarating portrayal of next-gen aerial dogfighting, Top Gun Maverick has quickly become a monumental success at the box office. But the producers couldn't have done it without leveraging the expertise of some of the world's foremost experts in all things aerospace, and that includes tapping into the minds of the Lockheed Martin Skunkworks engineers to craft their physics-bending Dark Star hyperjet. Oh my, that was such a cool start of the film. Anyway, without wanting to give away any of the plot specifics, the Dark Star aircraft features early in the film as Pete Maverick Mitchell, played by Tom Cruise, carries out his duties as a test pilot for the US Navy. The futuristic fighter jet is a jaw-dropping introduction to the hyperreal aesthetics of the film, but also strikes familiar chord with the aviation enthusiast due to a likeness to one of history's most revered aerial vehicles, the SR-71 Blackbird. When looking for some expert assistance in creating the Dark Star aircraft, the film's producers were pointed in the direction of Lockheed Martin Skunkworks division responsible for the SR-71, its forthcoming successor, the SR-72, and the U-2 spy plane. This collaboration created a new outlet for expression for Skunkworks' clandestine conceptual designers, in the sense that this particular aircraft design was one they could share with the world. As a conceptual designer, Jim explains in the video. So the division engineers then turned these designs into a full-size prototype aircraft with a structurally sound body and functional cockpit. The producers of the film say they lowered the aircraft a little to make it look sleeker and faster, but praised the mind-blowing design of the cockpit and compelling visuals it helped create in the film's opening sequences. And the video is very awesome indeed, which goes with that story.
We're going to skip the video, aren't we? We'll put the link.
I'm a bit worried. I'm a bit worried we'll get pulled down again if we play.
But you obviously you've seen the film, Armando, haven't you? Been to see the film?
Oh, for sure.
Oh yeah. What do you think of the first part of the film? It is a stunning aircraft, albeit a
well, you know what's funny? I went to see it with Megan, and she was just giving me the look of like, surely this is not real, and I just kind of gave her the side eye of, and now we're seeing that. I love that Lockheed Martin was part of the design team for this conceptual air quotes aircraft that they may or may not be working on.
Ooh.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool that Skunkworks was involved in the movie. We'll put the link in the show notes because the video is from Lockheed Martin and it does have Tom Cruise in there.
And if you haven't seen the film yet,
I've not seen the film.
Just go.
I've not seen the film yet.
Do you want to go and see it? If you want to go and see it, I'll go and see it again.
Yeah,
I'll go and see it again. I don't care.
John, have you seen it yet? No, good. Okay, that's a no. Yeah, next time you're on a layover, maybe that's what we should go and do.
Right, I'll check it out and see if it's still on, Matt. I'll take it and go and see it.
Okay, sounds like a plan.
All
right, guys. Well, listen, we're gonna before we wrap up the show, drum roll, please. Okay, something that we're incredibly proud to present. We've been talking about it for months now. By popular demand, Matt, are you ready to put up the picture?
Oh my word! Here we go.
I'm very scared about this.
Let's do it. So if you're watching the YouTube feed, you'll get to see the inaugural gray stuff mug for PTUK with Mac the Osprey. I'm still waiting for somebody to let me know why we named him Mac. It is a
I thought you named him Mac.
I did name him Mac, but there is a reason.
Oh,
why.
I see. Right.
There is a reason why I came up with that name. It's very obscure, but it's a lovely mug with Mac the Osprey on there. It says Plain Talking UK. In between the front and the back, you have the joint UK-US flag, which I loved. I always wore while I was over there stationed in the UK. Carlos has the hat. I think I still wear it on my my aerobatic flight suit. I love that flag, especially between our two countries. And then on the back, it says, I only listen for the gray stuff. So the first one's going to go to Nev.
Right.
I will pay double the price plus shipping to have the first one sent to Nev.
Right. Okay.
And if we have a template, perhaps we can just send him a T-shirt also with this on there.
Right. Okay. I mean,
going too far now.
Yeah.
Steady.
I mean,
it'll be a collared. It'll be a collared T-shirt.
I mean, I see your Nev bounds, and I raise you one Captain Al.
Oh, there you go. And they can give us an honest review.
Oh no!
Of
no,
how the mug drinks.
Right. Okay.
But there you go. Thank you, John, for putting that together. It's a lovely mug, and I can't wait to have one sitting here.
Does that mean I now have to put this on the website now? Does it?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. Yes. Okay. Very good. Well, I think the picture we've got here will be sufficient for purposes of putting it on the website. So that's. Oh yes, no, I'm aware of that. Yes. Sorry, so I'm being told.
I love the one-sided convecation that's happening on air right now.
Yeah. Sorry, you guys fill in the gaps. What could possibly go wrong? So yes, nice jugs. Alan White is saying. Thanks for that. Self-expecting.
Yeah.
on
Oh,
Monday.
thank you, Mazuz Kareem. It is Mach 0.45, I think, is the top speed. As in, like, Mach 0.45. As in, not very fast airplanes.
Right. Is that why it's called Mach? I'm still confused. Well,
Nope, it is not.
Right.
But it's just a nice observation.
Okay,
that
right.
That the top speed of the Osprey is
I thought
less than half.
Mach as in Mach V. What's that? What's that?
Nope. We'll talk about this on a different episode. I'm sure John is ready to.
How long are we going to drag this out for? Are we that short on content? No,
No, we're not.
No,
We're at the
indeed,
cut.
we've had to cut today, and we're about to go over, so we're going to have to start wrapping up. Those are the mugs, the long-awaited mugs. They are now finally going to be available. Hopefully in the next week or so. Hopefully, I will try everything I can to get it on the website, ready to order from next week. And what we'll probably try and do is get several together and sort of send them all out in one hit. So yes, there we go. Armando's very happy. His mugs finally exist. Look at the grin on his face. Look, there he is. He's beaming with pride. There we go. Can be used for beer as well. Mark is pointing out on the WhatsApp number.
Alan quite rightly points out the bots also want a mug as well.
The bot, do they? Lovely, yeah. Okay, I mean that's jugs of a different kind that they're going on about there.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
indeed.
So Nev, social media links.
Yes, we must have those, mustn't we? And if you want to get in touch with the show on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram, it's just search for Plain Talking UK. Our WhatsApp number is +44 757 224 9166. Email podcast@plaintalkinguk.com, and our website is www.plaintalkinguk.com. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll get notifications when we go live, and you can help shape the conversation of the show by joining us live in the chat room.
Which they've done a marvellous job of this evening, haven't they?
Yeah. If you do some shopping and you want to use our Amazon link, we've got that on the website as well. We get paid a small referral fee if you do your Amazon shopping via our website. And you can also become a Patreon as well, as we discussed at the beginning of the show. And finally, on Sunday, Carlos and I will be at Seething Airfield for their fly-in, featuring a lot of the Long EZ aircraft, the Burt Rutan designed aircraft, and he's got quite a few coming in, I think, Carlos, from what Dan was saying. So, and just looking behind Carlos, if you Carlos, you'll see what they look like. So that will be very interesting. We've got some nice interviews lined up as well. So really looking forward to it.
And while we were doing the Patreon there, we did actually receive a new Patreon while we were on air.
Yes,
which was really
thank
lovely.
you, Logan.
Yeah, so thank you very much to Logan Lynch, who's just become our newest Patreon. Thank you very much. As you probably have a look, there's some great videos from Armando and Carlos already on there. Some exclusive content. So make sure you take a look at those. Armando's ones especially are absolutely fascinating. The day in the life of a pilot, basically doing what he does for, I guess we call it a living. Is that right? Yeah.
This is what I do for a passion.
Yeah, right. Yes, that'll work. Yeah, that works too. But
a hard life.
Yeah, indeed. But we need to wrap up now. We are over
We
time.
do. So that is where we are going to bring episode 417 to a close of the show. Big thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. Big thanks to all the team, as always. And thanks to John as well for putting all the show notes and bits and pieces together.
Absolutely.
This week. Don't forget to tune in next Friday, 7 o'clock, where we will hopefully all be back, all being well. And we might have some good content for you to kick off our seeding day.
Oh, yes. Yeah, looking forward to that.
But anyway, thanks to everyone in the chat room for joining us. Thanks to all our audio downloaders of the show. And that is where we are going to bring the show to a close. So from me here in my home studio, from Matt in the PTUK studio, from Nev in his glorious Buckinghamshire studios, and from Armando in his beautiful mansion studio. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. See you next Friday.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.